Hey, this is Kieron, Coach's Corner Chats, and this is our second panel discussion. Uh, Joining me is Lindsay Hazard and Jennifer Searles. We're going to be talking about nutrition. It's one of those buzzwords that's out there that people say we got to talk about it, but a lot of us coaches that I've talked to don't know exactly what that entails. So hopefully after tonight's discussion, we'll have a better idea. Lindsay, go ahead and introduce yourself, where you're at, and all the good stuff.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Hazard. I am a dietitian out of Dallas, Texas, and I love working with young and teen athletes all over.
Jennifer, where are you at and what are you up to?
Yeah, I'm Jennifer Searles, Thrive Nutrition Cincinnati, and I'm located in Cincinnati, obviously, and serving also the Northern Kentucky kind of area. So licensed in both Ohio and Kentucky. I also enjoy the middle school, high school, early college kind of athlete. I've raised athletes, so that's sort of how I got into this gig. And yeah, counseling one-on-one, giving education to larger training programs, and they're already investing so much in what they're doing, and nutrition kind of feels like that missing link. So that's why I'm excited about this.
All right, so we'll rock and roll with our first kind of mini topic. So what are some of the issues that you see when you're working with teens and young adults that why is it a missing piece for a number of them? And either one can hop right in.
Well, I think, kids as they grow into their sport, parents do a lot when they're young, and then they're getting to that point where they're starting to have a lot more independence, a lot more choice as they get to driving. Then, there's a lot of peer influence. They go out with their friends. They've got a lot more going on. And so those are unique challenges that maybe they've never seen before and parents have never had to deal with before. And helping them make their own good choices can be challenging because nobody's doing it for them. And so then it becomes the easy, convenient thing. So that's, I think, one of the big ones that I see a lot is just like, oh, I'm too lazy to cut up the apple.
Yes.
So I'll grab the bar instead because all I have to do is open the package. So that's a big one.
Yeah. And another one I see is with school sports and club sports, their schedules get so jammed packed. They're just not quite sure how do I get in all the nutrition that I need and when do I get it in and what? And so that can be a challenge. And that could be a challenge for me as the dietitian too, to help figure out how can we get in all the nutrition that you need when you're practicing so many hours of the day. So it's definitely something that I've seen a lot of lately.
Yeah, and kind of building on that busyness, it's also a super stressful time for kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're, especially as they get up into high school, thinking about where they want to go to college. The classes get really hard, the homework load plus the sport. It can be overwhelming, and plus they're still immature, right? They're still growing up. And how do you manage all that? And with all the mental health issues we are now more aware of, it just all compounds, and then food ends up at the bottom of the list, or it's more of a medication to help them feel better and cope versus something that can really nourish them and help them cope in positive ways versus just the indulgences that, and they may see that from their parents. I know I'm guilty of that where, if I'm having a bad day, I like ice cream, so, these are just things that we pass on. Plus you've got hormones going on and puberty and growth spurts. There's a lot going on in these little guys. So, and gals, they don't know what's happening to them, but they have much more freedom than they used to. So it gets challenging. And then we go to college, and then it's like a whole other, how do I manage myself? So.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So the next thing that kind of comes up then is what is good nutrition? So like what things, so if they want to start adding it in and they can find a balance of, I will cut the apple, or I'll find time to prepare the night before for my busy schedule. What kind of things does good nutrition even look like, and why is it so important? Like what is it? How does it help the athlete themselves? Lindsay, go ahead and take this one.
I was like, there's so many things that nutrition does for athletes. Typically, when I start working with athletes, they're typically motivated by sport, right? Their performance in sport. So we will talk a lot about energy for training and then recovering from training. And I find that gets a lot of good buy-in because nutrition is so important for energy. And we're not going to have energy at practice if we haven't ate in 6 hours. And then on the flip side for recovery, if we don't give our body what it needs in order to recover, how is that supposed to happen? So that's definitely a place I like to start with athletes because they're so young, they see change really quickly, especially the energy front. When I get athletes that actually will start taking in a snack before practice, they're like, Lindsay, I didn't even know, like I was supposed to have this energy. And that can be a great way to go into, okay, like what should our actual meals look like around training? Because they start trusting and believing that nutrition does work.
Yeah, those big positive outcomes is exciting because it creates buy-in, which is awesome. I also, you see a lot of athletes that are just underfueled. They're just not eating enough. And, kids are also growing, right? So you're not only fueling your sport, you're fueling your physical and mental growth, which is astronomical at these ages, right? These huge growth spurts in the boys through high school and early college, and the girls a little bit earlier. And most people are walking around, no breakfast, no snack, maybe, a school lunch, which for teenagers is just not big enough. Oh, I didn't bring my snack. So really they haven't had a whole lot of calories before practice. Then you run into sort of that nervous gut, if they kind of training to eat before practice is new for a lot of kids too, or they're afraid to eat because they'll have GI distress or something like that. So that can be something to watch out for, and work your way into with them, testing different foods and that kind of stuff. I also, in school, so on and off the field is a big area for me where I like to talk like, okay, athlete, but student. Human being, right? I think when your emotional health, if you're well fueled, I've been hangry, you've been hangry, you're not a very good human being when you're hangry. And so let alone a good teammate or a friend or anything that like school sports in particular is all about, kind of that social aspect. So I think a well-fueled athlete really, not only the physical performance, which is usually why they come, right? But supporting the growth, supporting the mental development and their ability to perform in school, as well as their emotional support to, help them be good people and able to deal with adversity. When you're not fueled, the sky is falling on every little thing. And that's what we want to get beyond, which translates not only in life, but also into their play, making decisions quickly and things like that on the field or on the court.
Something that popped up in my head was we're talking about busy schedules and the age of a lot of these players. It's the parents that are having to get them to practices and to games and all that type of stuff, or get them to school, pick them up from school. How important is it to not just educate the players, but how important is to get the parents in the loop? Because I know talking to like a 13-year-old, that doesn't always get taken home and the message clearly doesn't get there. How important is it to go kind of holistic and get everybody that's a part of that player's, I guess, life in a way, kind of locked in and educated?
I think it's really important, especially if I know as a mom myself, I'm the one who's primarily putting that food on the table or bringing those snacks or packing those lunches. So definitely making sure the parents are understanding the message the same way that the teen is interpreting it so that they can be supportive. I find that most of the parents of athletes that I'm working with are more than willing to help and do what needs to be done. They just often don't know or don't realize what their athlete needs, especially when speaking about underfueling, because that's definitely something we see a lot of, is most parents aren't even aware that these kids have really, really high energy needs. They're not just small adults. They're in like the biggest period of growth and development that we're going to see once we're in that teenage years, and making sure that we're giving them enough food to nourish their bodies to get through life and all the sports.
Yeah, I definitely see, with the younger ones when they're in those 13, 14, the parent is always in the appointment with them because they need to hear. Usually the parent has been the one that has initiated the contact in the first place because they're concerned, or, they want to help their kid be the best they can be. So it's like another thing that they want to add to the regimen, which is great. And a lot of the messages I try to give is like, you are not your mom, right? Like your mom has to think about her health and her weight and her energy levels and things like that a lot differently in her body than you do in your body, right? And so, while your mom's trying to maybe not eat as many carbs or, have smaller portions or whatever, that's not or not eat after dinner for a snack. That's not necessarily right for you. You should have a bedtime snack, maybe if you're a little underweight or underfueled or trying to, put on some growth and you're in a growth spurt or something. You need those extra calories. And so don't feel bad about that. Don't eat like your parents. Conversely, parents don't eat like your kids, right? Because that's not good for us either at our age. So those are, points that I try to hit as the parent is sitting there, so that it's okay if they're a little different. Maybe it's portion size, maybe it's variety, something like that, that the kid needs that the parent doesn't necessarily need. I also think that when the kid is bought in, then they can, even if the parent wasn't in, like if it's a team education or something, if the child is asking for it and feeling empowered to like, let's help out with the process, I think that's kind of the win-win, right? So, we'll go to the grocery store, as parents, like, well, let's go to the grocery store and pick out some things, and try and learn it and do it together is probably the best way to go about it, because then you kind of have buy-in from both sides versus, oh, my mom's making me go to the dietitian, and as soon as they, like Lindsay said, as soon as they get that, wow, I have so much energy, then that's immediate buy-in, right? It's great.
And when we're learning these new skills, like learning, okay, how do we build these plates? They're also learning cooking skills. And it's so great for even 13, 14-year-olds to start learning how to cook, because the older they get, like you mentioned earlier, the more independent they are and the more they're out there making their own choices and then thinking about college and beyond. Cooking skills are great to have. Being able to feed yourself, such a gift, right?
Yes. Yeah. And, not everybody plays sport long-term. So there is life after sport and good nutrition habits after sport, that the earlier we start, the better off they're going to be in their mid-20s. Even if they play in college, they're probably not going to be pro. So how do those things translate into later life as well? So all good skills.
That made me think that microwaves are wonderful, but they have not helped in terms of, creating those cooking skills or ability to like have fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and cooking actual meat and stuff like that. It's really quick and to it. And talking about that, we'll move on to what are some good fueling hydration guidelines. Lindsay talked about when the player starts to find out that, holy moly, by adding this couple snacks or this thing to my nutrition repertoire, I feel much, much better. So maybe what things can players start doing consistently now and start building on? And then timing wise, I know a lot of coaches you talked about before practice, how important is it after games, all those types of things. I know there's a lot of, practice versus playing a game and all that, and it has different expectations of what the needs are. But what are some kind of maybe basic guidelines that people or players, parents could follow to kind of get started? Jennifer, go ahead and start us on this one.
Well, the first thing here is it really depends on it's not a one size fits all approach, right? What kind of sport are you playing? How much of that sport do you play? If you're a soccer player and you're a 90-minute player, that's a different nutrition plan than a 15 minutes a half sub, right? So be really honest about what energy you're going to expend, because if you overnourish, that's not so awesome either, right? Because then you're not burning it off. So you want to, we're dietitians, so we'll say you should call your dietitian and get your, individualized nutrition plan for your specific needs. But there's so many factors, not only sport, playing time, intensity, what part of the season are you in? Are you preseason, during the season, or off season? Are you working on any particular goal? Are you trying to build strength in the off season, or are you recovering from injury? Or, there's all kinds of things that impact your specific nutrition plan. So that's kind of the caveat as we talk about this.
Yes.
one size fits all. Are you in a growth spurt? Are you male or female?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of stuff like that. But in general, and Lindsay, you can chime in here too, like there's like your day-to-day nutrition, so your meals and snacks, and the quality of the things that go into that, balance, variety, all the good FDA, whole fruits and vegetables and whole grains and lean proteins and dairy and all that stuff, right? Makes up a good sports nutrition plan as well. But then in addition, it's timing. So when you come to practices and games, there's a before fueling strategy so that you're topped off, you've got glycogen stores in your muscles, you've got, you're well hydrated and ready to go so that you're not starting low, right? You want to start as best as you can. Depending on what you're playing, there might be some during, if the duration is 90 minutes or longer, a race, endurance kind of sports. And then there's the recovery after, and that'll depend too on when you're going to play again. Like if you have a Friday night game and you don't play again until Monday, like whatever. But if you're playing again Saturday and then again on Sunday, then that's a different fueling strategy where you got to like turn it around and get your energy stores back up so you're ready to go. Right. Or if you're building strength, then it's, trying to make sure the building blocks for that are in place so that you're not wasting your effort. So Lindsay, you can.
Yes. And yeah, on top of all of that, I just gave a talk to parents last night. And when it comes to nutrition, it's like the everyday meals and snacks are going to make the biggest impact. And it's the most boring and it's the most monotonous, but it's awesome and it will pay off and it's going to do great things for you. But it's not just about, okay, what am I eating in the 2 hours before my game? It's really, what are you doing all throughout the week that's going to set your body up for success going into that game? And I think that's really important for athletes to understand and their families, because I feel like the questions I get all the time are like, okay, what should I eat before my game? Or what should I be drinking during my game? And it's like this, that stuff's great. And that stuff can make a difference, but we really do need to focus on like that bottom of the pyramid, the base, and be eating well all the time. And of course, it's fine to occasionally have those French fries, but that base of the pyramid is really going to set us up for success when it comes to the game day.
A lot of the comments so far have been the food side. What about the hydration, the drinking water or Gatorades? Okay. Can a kid drink a Mountain Dew or a Monster? Are those things even touchable? On there, we hear different stories about, yes, drink Gatorade after or during, or what things should they be putting in? I'm assuming water is a big winner, but are there other things that they need to stay on top of? And why is that hydration such an important piece?
Do you want me
to
Yeah, so hydration is definitely an important piece. And there's a lot of factors that come into play with that too. I will always say definitely want to be drinking our water. I'm telling athletes, like, I love Gatorade during certain situations, but I do not need to see you drinking Gatorade with your lunch. Energy drinks like Monster, Celsius, all of those, I say, let's not do those. Like, let's talk about what can actually give us energy and actually fuel us for sport, not the bursts that we get from whatever ingredients are in the proprietary blends of these energy drinks. So for my athletes, for hydration, a lot of that depends on climate too. So I'm here in Dallas and it gets really, really hot here. And so when it's hot out, and especially if we're training outdoors, even here, if we're training outdoors at 9 o'clock, it's like 90 degrees. So we have to
get that in Cincinnati.
So we have to stay on top of hydration. And that is where electrolyte supplements can be really helpful, because that just helps pull that water in to help keep us really hydrated. And I just kind of work with athletes that way, but it's kind of like our meals. We want to be hydrated all the time. We're not just chugging water on game day. It's something we want to focus on a daily basis. And I typically have athletes start with, okay, let's take half your body weight in ounces and let's at least try to hit that minimum a day. And let's look at how much are you sweating? Are you someone who's like me, who is completely drenched in sweat, salt lines everywhere? Or are you someone who doesn't sweat a ton during your training or during your games, and it's not something that we have to be like really, really concerned with during. And we just kind of we can calculate sweat rate. There's a lot of different things we can do to really get down to the nitty gritty. But overall, water's great. Definitely can use things like Gatorade and Powerade when we hit like that 90-minute mark. If we know we're going to be playing for 90 minutes or practice last 90 minutes, it can be really useful to help keep our energy up and help keep us hydrated overall.
Yeah, I agree. I always tell, Gatorade and those kind of things are sports drinks, not recreational drinks, right? And so if you're not sporting, then you don't need it, right? So because it does have a lot of things that you don't need if you're not sweating. A lot of sugar, a lot of salt. So yeah, I agree. Let's not be drinking it with our lunch, right? Now there's other, and we don't have the heat like that here in Cincinnati most of the year. But yeah, when you're in high heat environments, high humidity environments, you're going to need to replace more than maybe just water, right? Even if practice is a little shorter, or your energy expenditure isn't so bad or isn't as intense as maybe at other times. You still may need that. And yeah, like Lindsay said, your sweat rate, the kind of sweater you are, if you're salty, then you're going to need to replace that. Meaning like if your shirt has rings on it after it dries, that's a good way to tell, just observation, see what it's like. Do you feel crusty on your skin? That kind of thing. And then, even swimmers sweat. So like when they're in the water, so I don't feel like I'm sweaty. Like if you're skiing or you're swimming or you're doing things where you don't perceive the sweat, you are still sweating. So, and still need to be hydrated and still need to maintain that. So, I saw something on Instagram the other day, like, somebody my age survived school without a water bottle, right? And how did we do that? Because today you're just not water bottle at school. So, make sure that you're carrying your water bottle through school, because it's, totally 100% socially acceptable now, and the teachers and whatever. So there's really no excuse to not be hydrated because you just have access to it all the time. But no, I don't think sports drinks are really necessary, except, until you get to that point where you're like super sweating, you're
tournaments.
Tournaments, you have to turn it around. The thing I will say about sports drinks is it's a good liquid way to get calories. So if you do have a nervous stomach, if you do just struggle with even eating, some of these guys that are so lean, they just can't take in enough calories. Like drink a Gatorade. It's got a ton of calories in it. And, that could be a good way that's easier on the stomach maybe than solid food. So athlete by athlete.
So the name of the discussion is coaching and player nutrition. What are some of the roles that coaches play in this whole scenario? What things can they be doing maybe as, for practices or for games? What can they do to start educating? Like if they watch this discussion and they take away some little tidbits, what can the coach do to help kind of bridge this gap that maybe the missing piece in this whole kind of player development thing? Lindsay, go ahead and take away.
They could bring us in, right, to talk to their parents, their athletes. And I honestly think that is a great idea. Like bring a dietitian in to come in and talk about nutrition, talk very high level. What are some things that they can start doing? Because they like hearing information, but they really want an action plan. Like what steps can I take to help work on my nutrition? And that is something that I feel like both of us probably do on a daily basis. And it can be very useful. And it just gets the idea planted in the athlete's head that, oh, hey, like this actually could make a difference. And a lot of times, especially parents are looking for their kid to get the couple extra percentage points better. Nutrition is definitely, I haven't met anyone that's eating super, super well, right? So we can start using nutrition to really help them make those gains in performance. And like Jennifer mentioned, it's a lot of life skills too when it comes to nutrition. And then on the coach's side, coaches have such an influence. I've worked with athletes who they're like, oh, like my coach says I can't have XYZ, so they won't include it in their diet. And so just knowing that your influence is really big on these kids, and when you tell them to do something, they are listening, even though it may not seem like it at the time. They're hearing what you say. And so having to having that positive influence when it comes to nutrition, talking about, hey, maybe being, hey, did you guys have your snack before coming out here today? Or what did everyone pack to recover with while we're having our team talk afterwards? Or maybe even if you're club level or you have a really supportive booster club, maybe there's things that the parents could do, like, or could we send some of our funds for like chocolate milk after tough workouts? Or could we have like a little bit of a, maybe a mini fueling station for our athletes, because nutrition is so important when it comes to athletic performance.
Yeah. And I totally echo that. You're a huge influence, way more than parents, right? Because your coach things, that could impact my playing time and my, status on the team and my college prospects and things like that. So coaches are like super, super influential. Be a good example yourself, right? Carry your water bottle when you're out at tournaments or traveling with the team. Like, make good choices. Don't get the burger and fries if you don't want them eating burger and fries. I tell my athletes, when you travel for tournaments, like, you're there to perform. You're not there on vacation. Well, neither's a coach. So don't eat like you're on vacation. Be a good role model for your tournaments or for your athletes. And the one thing, and I know no coach wants to admit that they do this, but they do. I've heard it in various different forms. Please, 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 please do not talk to your athletes about their weight.
I was going to say this. Yes.
Do not talk to your athletes about their weight. And it's not just girls. I'm talking boys too. Okay. There are enough problems with how they feel about themselves without their coach telling them they're overweight or underweight. All boys want to be big and strong, right? A 14-year-old boy does not have the hormones to hit the gym effectively. So don't tell them that. All right. Please, let's focus on what are the performance vectors. You need to increase your stamina, your strength, your agility, your endurance, those kinds of things, versus you need to lean out so that you can be faster. No, we're going to work on your speed. We're going to work on, I don't tell them how to increase their flexibility or their agility or anything like that. So I'm trying to stay in my lane, and please just stay in yours as well. Because kids are fragile.
Yes.
They're very, 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 very fragile at these middle school, high school ages, and even early college. A lot of body changes going on. They can't control any of that. And look at the parents. If you got a lean kid and you see that the dad is lean, the kid is not going to be a linebacker, right? That's just not in the phenotype. So, and girls will go through like this, well, boys too, like the out and then up and then out and then up, where they put on the weight first and then they grow tall. And that's a natural thing. And so, like a 14-year-old girl should never be punished or highlighted that her weight is a problem, because it'll resolve itself, right?
Yes.
If we talk about, good nutrition and fueling appropriately, and then those performance vectors that are important to the game, right? So those are the big things for me that I see and fight a lot.
Yes.
There's also a lot of, like you said, like my coach told me I shouldn't eat this, or this is, my strength and conditioning coach put me on a bulk and cut diet or whatever. All of a sudden you're eating 6,000 calories, and that's not really right for you. So, like, beware of giving nutrition advice. I like the idea of creating awareness. Let's talk about, who packed, what do you have for breakfast this morning? What did you bring for recovery? To just awareness, not necessarily dictating it. What are you going to have for dinner when you get home? My personal trainer actually asked me that on, well, he's in beer, sorry. But last time we had salmon and it was really good. So, there's awareness building versus like holding their feet to the fire about nutrition. They are not professional athletes. They're kids. So let them be kids. And just set in a good example, and then encourage and reinforce. If you notice an uptick in performance, and even, you may notice or know that they're working on their diet or working with a dietitian or their fueling strategy, and you notice an uptick in performance, like, say something, because that creates buy-in. So, and carries a lot more weight than parents. So,
yes.
All right. So the next thing I wanted to we're going to kind of talk about is you'd even talked about Instagram earlier. There is a lot of stuff out there, and I call it misinformation on nutrition. What are some things that maybe when we're talking to players and parents beyond just, hey, let's get a dietitian in here, we'll kind of hear what they say, someone that's actually, a specialist in this area. What are some good things out there that parents can maybe go and research? Are there websites out there? Are there actually things on social media that are helpful? Because we all know you can go down a rabbit hole and end up, you need to talk about bulking and just crazy diets that are out there. And, oh, try this supplement and all that type of stuff. And that's another thing that kind of pops up is kids talking about creatine and I'm going to take whey protein and all this. When does that even come into this? Is that stuff that these players should even be thinking about? Should they be waiting? Let's get through my growth until my, my mid 20s, late 20s, when my body has kind of figured out what it wants to do with itself, and then start adding things in. What are some of the misinformations out there, and where are things that we can find out that are actually helpful? Lindsay, go ahead.
For misinformation, I think the biggest one I'm seeing these days is carbs are bad. Like low carb. I hear a lot of that, especially athletes will be like, oh, well, my mom and dad are trying not to eat carbs, so our dinners won't normally have carbs in them, and really educating the athlete and their family on why carbs are so important for athletes of all ages, not just our young athletes, and being like, okay, like, but you may not be exercising 2 to 3 hours a day like your athlete is, so your carb needs aren't quite as high, but your athlete does need these carbs, and it's going to help them develop more as an athlete. It's going to help a lot with keeping the brain happy, muscles happy, and just realizing that carbs are not evil. Like, just because something is like looking at a carb, eating a carb is not going to make you fat. Like, carbs can be very helpful, especially when it comes to energy levels, and they should be something that are consumed regularly throughout the day. It's not something that we're just trying to omit from our diets. And there's lots of vitamins, minerals, and fiber in there as well. So I'm a big fan of carbs, and I think athletes and their families are always surprised like how passionate I am about carbohydrates, because it is something that, with I think the rise of like keto diet, low carb diets, whatever diets we want to put out there, I'm seeing that athletes are actually eating like, not all of them, some of them are eating like higher fat, high protein, low carb diets unintentionally, just because of what's out there and what is considered healthy these days.
Jennifer, what's some of the things you're seeing out there kind of misinformation wise?
And a lot of, so yes, but it's all like there's a kernel of truth in everything. And that's like, there was a study once upon a time, but then you have to really look at the study. How big was the base size? Was it peer reviewed in a journal? Like, was it among old men, but we're talking about 14-year-old boys, or bodybuilders. A lot of them look at the bodybuilders because they do a lot of social media. And what are they doing? And that's not really relevant for a 16-year-old girl playing soccer, which are not the ones who are following the bodybuilders, but, so there's like kernels in there, but may just not be relevant to what your goals are as a teen athlete. If it's too good to be true, or too shocking to even, unless it's about trans fat, if it's too shocking to even believe, that's clickbait. They make money when you go into their site because they've been shocking, but it's probably like somewhere in the middle. I've got a lot of questions recently on like testosterone and things that kill testosterone. That seems to be a hot topic, among the 17, 18, 19-year-old boys. Because there's just a lot of buzz about it right now, and never eat this and don't, and my message is always balance. Like, if you give one food that much weight in your diet, that's a problem for lots of reasons, right? So balance your diet, make sure you're eating a variety of foods, so that no one thing is going to kill you, right? Or kill your performance or your hormone levels or whatever. Macros seem to be like counting your macros. Seems to be big on social media right now. That's like a trend, which is not terrible, but it's also not like a magic bullet. So, yeah, that's, getting in to the diet and looking at, what am I really, really eating once or twice, and then managing it from there to just be aware, but like counting calories, counting your macros, getting really focused and almost obsessive about it is not a healthy way to be with your food, right? So I try to discourage some of that. Like, let's take a snapshot and kind of see where we are and what adjustments we might want to make. And then, in general, go about it this way versus like be really strict, keep a diary, do all these things. That's not healthy for kids to get into those habits.
What are options then in terms of, are there websites that one could go to? You mentioned FDA earlier. Is that kind of a place to go, or is there, you just kind of have to find them? Or I don't know if there is stuff that you can literally just say, hey, go to this website, or is it just good to look up dietitians' blogs and kind of read through what they have?
Yeah, I mean, I always recommend, if we're like looking up stuff, like who's giving the message, right? So if someone, I mean, I feel like TikTok is the thing now. I'm not on TikTok, but I know a lot of my athletes are on TikTok, and look who's giving the message, or what are we looking at here, and trying to find, okay, well, what do dietitians think about this? Because dietitians, we have a lot of education. We have to get licensed. There's a lot of like rules, I guess, for us to follow, and structure for us to follow to get our title. And so we are supposed to be preaching research-backed information. And so most dietitians, I do feel like, follow this. And so it's looking for those. And there's definitely a lot more too coming out from sports dietitians, and talking all about all things sports. But there's constantly new things coming out. And I had a couple athletes ask me, there was 2 supplements. I can't remember the names of them. They're going to send them over to me later, that I have not heard of. So there's constantly things coming out. And I'm honest with my athletes. If I have not heard of this, I'm not going to tell you yes, no. I'm going to say, let's look into this. Let's talk, like, let's see what it actually is, and go from there, because I'm not going to pretend I know something that I don't.
I'm sorry, you mentioned the supplement idea, and I kind of brought that up. Is supplementation something that players at the age of 14, 15, I mean, at what point is supplementation something that might need to be looked at, honestly, Jennifer?
I think it's important for athletes to really understand what their body can do by itself, right? So push your boundaries, challenge yourself, get to the point once you're grown up, like 17, 18 years old, you're sort of done. Like, boys will continue to grow, but you're sort of through puberty for the most part, right? And you can really push yourself in the gym, push yourself on the track, whatever it is, and find your limits before you start supplementing them. Because if you never know what you're actually capable of, you might surprise yourself. And you just start supplementing right away, then, it kind of, I don't know, doesn't feel right. It's kind of like, well, but you could have done that on your own, and you're putting all this stock and money into the supplement when you could have just done that on your own if you really understood what your body could do, which is always way more than we think it can do. Supplements in general, there are several that are well-researched and accepted. Whey protein, I really don't have a whole lot of problem with people using whey protein if they're don't have an intolerance to whey or anything like that. Even at the younger ages, it's a good way during growth spurts to like make up some of that gap.
It's convenient too.
It's convenient. You put it in a smoothie, it sets well. Like that's the one that, like, I would be okay using that in a early teen, creatine, no, like, it's generally recognized as, safe. It works for most people. It's a good thing, but it's something that you're not going to really need until you're kind of at a certain point in your training. And I would say that's kind of around that, 17, 18, 19 is when you can start to think about using that, once you've pushed yourself as far as you think you can go. Right. I know it's super trendy, and all the guys in the weight room are like, yeah, I got my creatine, and, they got all their stuff, that they're trying to, but it's expensive. It's not researched among kids. So any research on supplements is never done among a youth population. So there's no like guarantee. And then just the supplement industry in and of itself. And Lindsay, if you want to weigh in here too, like, yeah, it's proprietary blends and all that stuff is not it's not regulated at all. So not necessarily safe depending on what you're getting.
Yeah.
No experience with some of those things.
Yeah. And I mean, and to kind of piggyback on that is when athletes, because I feel like they'll ask me about supplements like in our first session. I'm like, well, I'm not talking anything about supplements until let's, again, go back to the bottom of that pyramid. Let's look at our diet, and our diet's going to do way more for you than a supplement can. And if a supplement is making these claims that sound too good to be true, then that supplement probably isn't legal if it does those things, or it's not really going to do those things, because they can put whatever they want to. They can make any claims they want to on those bottles. So I'm not anti-supplement, but I definitely think let's look at your diet. Obviously, if we're, vitamin D deficient, then we're going to supplement with that. But I really I want to look at what your diet looks like. What does your training look like? Are those matching up very well? And for most teenagers, that's a no. So we can start with that. And then I have some parents that are like gung-ho on like their kid taking supplements. So we can address that. Or I have some that are like absolutely 100% no. And I'm never going to be like, oh, yes, your kid has to be on this protein powder because they need it, unless their kid's eating like 30 grams of protein a day or something. But most of the time we can accomplish what we need to with diet and go from there.
Yeah, because you can get everything in a supplement from food.
Mm-hmm.
So no supplement really gives you anything that you can't get in your diet.
Mm-hmm.
So we've covered a lot of things, from issues that teens and young adults run into in terms of getting nutrition. We've talked about what good nutrition looks like, fueling and hydration, and kind of the idea of what does that look like if you're an athlete, the role of the coach in that. And we've just talked about kind of maybe some of the misinformation and some of the things to be hesitant about and things to look for in terms of developing quality nutritional habits. With all of that, and I know there's so much, and we've kind of just tipped that, like the tip of the iceberg on this. And I'm just going to let you, what are some things that maybe that are in your, as we've just talked here tonight, have kind of popped up in your head and you feel like, hey, this is some things that people need to kind of keep an eye on, or something maybe that came up that you want to make sure that we stress before we shut this thing down? Lindsay, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I'm kind of back on that social media topic, because a lot of athletes will come to me, and both girls and boys will come to me, and they're like wanting to look like whoever this person is, or this professional athlete that they're seeing, and just realizing that you are a young athlete, and most of those professional athletes that you're looking at, they have been training for years to get their bodies. And some of that's genetics, and a lot of, some of that's hard work too, but we're not going to look like, a professional football player when we're 16 years old. Like it's not going to happen. And then I feel like I hear this more from my females, like, hey, I want to look like this influencer I see on Instagram. Well, that influencer probably most likely is not training to play in tournaments or to win games or to go play in college. And there's different diets for different goals. Like if our goal in life is only to have a 6-pack, that diet's going to look very different than someone whose goal is like, I don't want to get injured. I want to have energy. I want to be able to perform at my highest level. Those diets are going to look very different. And so it's like, what's important to you, the 6-pack or the athletic performance? Because they're not going to look the same.
Jennifer, final thoughts.
Yeah, those are great points. And then also, I'm always trying to keep in mind, like, they're kids, right? They're kids. They're not professional athletes. They're not even really elite athletes most of the time. They need to enjoy food. They need to have a positive relationship with food, with or without the sport. And they're not going to make 100% perfect choices. I mean, no parent ever has seen their kid make 100% perfect choices, and that's okay. If they go out to Cane's on Friday nights, that's fine, as long as they don't have like a 8 a.m. game the next day, right? Like, there's a time and a place, and it's not, we're not the food police as parents and coaches, and you gotta let them figure it out and just support them on the journey, because at some point they're not going to be playing sport. They're going to have some good, healthy habits, in life. And that's really what we want to see as they grow up. So not only their performance, but that, they can enjoy the journey and be set up for success in the future.
Well, I want to say thank you to both of you, Lindsay Hazard and Jennifer Searles, for taking the time. The information you have shared has been awesome, and I can't wait to kind of clip and share and all the types of things. Lots of awesome nuggets, not only for coaches, but players, parents, like we talked about. There's a whole bunch of people that are a part of the player dynamic, and I love the idea of building a foundation. That's a great way, like a visual, even for me, in terms of that pyramid. So big thank you to that. Anybody else that was out there watching this, I appreciate it. I'm going to shut this thing down. This is Kieron with Coach's Corner Chats, and I'm out. Peace.